solving quadratics. So previously when we looked at solving quadratics, they were equal to 0, and we knew that we just had to factorize and then solve them. But here the equations aren't equal to 0, so this gives us the extra step at the start to make the equation equal to 0 first. So we cannot solve a quadratic until we make it equal to 0. So when we look at these, that's our first objective, to make them equal to 0. So I could, on this first one, subtract 12 from both sides and add on x to both sides. So subtract 12 and add on x, and that's going to give me x squared plus x minus 12. And I've put them in that order just so that it looks like a quadratic with my x squared, my x, and then my number. I could have taken the x squared this side, but I want to try and keep the x squared as positive because that way it makes it much easier when I'm factorizing and solving later. So always try to keep the quadratic positive if you can. So once I've got to this point, I can then factorize the equation, or if I can't factorize, then I'll complete the square, then I will use the quadratic formula so that I can then solve it. So for this first one, we're looking for two numbers that multiply together to make minus 12 and add to make 1. So minus 12 could come from 3 and 4, or 1 and 12, or 2 and 6. Okay, and if I'm looking for 1, this has definitely got something to do with 1. It's got a difference of 1. So I'm going to be using these ones here. So I have x and the 3, and then x and a 4. Now I want them to multiply to make a negative and add to make a positive. So therefore I'm going to have positive 4 minus 3. Okay, so now that we've got it factorized, we can now use that to solve it. So if it's x minus 3, then that gives me a solution of x is equal to 3, and x plus 4 gives me a solution of x is equal to minus 4. So I've now got my final solution of 3 and minus 4, which is the solution to the quadratic x squared equals 12 minus x. So for the second one, again, I need to make them equal to 0. But I also have brackets in them. So I'm going to sort the brackets out first, and then I can have the single terms, which I can pull to one side. So I'm going to multiply this bracket out, and that gives me x squared minus 11x is equal to 42. And now I can subtract the 42 from both sides. So that gives me x squared minus 11x minus 42 is equal to 0. And now I can factorize that. So I'm looking for things that multiply together to make 42. So if I know I'm going to have x and x. So things that multiply together to make 42 are 1 and 42. Or we have 2 and 21. Or we have 3 and 14. Or we have 4 won't go, 5 won't go, and then 6 and 7. So we want to find a adding or subtracting of 11. So looking at that, it doesn't look like it's going to go with any of the factorization. Okay, none of those give me 11. This one is not got a difference or adding. This one, oh, this one might. This is 3 and 14. So let's try this one. So if I take this one here, I've got the 3 and the 14. I want them to make minus 11, so minus 14 plus 3. And then if I subtract them, if I multiply them, I'm going to get minus 42. So I've got a solution there of minus 3 and positive 14. So x is equal to minus 3, and you should always write x equals at the end. We want to be clear with the notation, or x is equal to 14. Looking at these two, again, slightly harder again. So again, we need to multiply out the brackets first. So this is going to give me my x squared plus 11x. Then I've got from the other bracket 4x plus 16. So 4x plus 16 on the other side, and then I'm adding on the 2. Then I can take everything to the same side of the equation. So x squared, now I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides of the equation, And then these two here give me 18, so I'm going to subtract 18 from both sides of the equation as well. So if I just make a little bit more room there, we've got x squared. If I'm taking off 4x, I'm going to be left with 7, so plus 7x. And then I'm going to take off the 18, so minus 18 is equal to 0. And then again, I'm looking to factorize that. So numbers that make 18, 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. And I can see there that 2 and 9 are going to have something to do with the 7. So my two brackets is equal to 0, so I know I can do this. I know I can solve it. I have 2 and 9. I want them to multiply to make a negative, so I'm going to have one of each sign. And I want them to add to make 7, so I'm going to have positive 9. And if I subtract 2, then that's going to give me positive 7. So my solution, x is equal to 2 and x is equal to minus 9. And then my two solutions. And then the last one here, we have a fraction. So the first thing we have to do if we ever have a fraction is multiply to get rid of this fraction. So I'm going to multiply both sides of my equation by x plus 5. So on the left hand side there, I'm going to have x plus 5 times by x plus 5 again. And I've put them both in brackets so that I don't forget to multiply any part of it out. And then on the right hand side, I'm going to have 1, just 1. Because if I had x plus 5 at the top, it would cancel out with the x plus 5 I've got at the bottom. And therefore, it just gives me the 1. So now I need to make sure that I multiply out all the brackets. That was the next step we had. So I'm going to multiply out the brackets using the quadratic. So that gives me x squared plus 10x from both sides of my equation. And now it's equal to 0. So only at this point can I then factorize and solve it. So again, it's a single x squared. So I can just put it in as x and x. And I'm looking for numbers that multiply to make 24. So that's 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 doesn't go. Sorry, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. And I want them to add together to make 10. So it's going to be the 4 and the 6 there. So 4 and 6. And in this one, it's going to be two positives because they're timesing to make positive and adding to make a positive. So x is equal to minus 4 or x is equal to minus 6. So that one's quite a tricky one. You've got the fraction, then you've got the brackets, then you've got the rearranging. So each time you just want to go through that process. Do I have a fraction? Do I have any brackets to multiply out? Now I can get everything on the same side. And then once it's equal to 0, then you can factorize.